Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to week 6 of our course in criminology. Today we're going to be reviewing chapter 6 in the 3rd edition, which is chapter 5 for those of you that have the 2nd edition. The title being Social Structure, It's How We Live. So we're going to be looking at, first, an overview of sociological theories in general. There's actually 3 succeeding chapters that cover sociological theories. Then we're going to get into the meat of specifically what social structure theories are. Things like social disorganization, which we're going to spend a lot of time with in a separate video, strain theory, culture conflict, and then we'll get into, in the final video, the policy implications and a summary of the chapter overall. So that's going to take us 5 separate small videos, and hopefully the feedback I'm getting is that you like the smaller videos, the chunks. They're easy to take and a little bit less involved for you. So this week, hopefully I broke it down better. They do take a little bit longer because obviously I'm just not reading the wonderful information that's on the slides. You can do that for yourself, but trying to explain it somewhere between, what's on the slide and what you're going to get out of your book, which of course you do need to read, and hopefully you already reviewed the chapter, you've already read through and looked at some of the things in the chapter itself so that you are prepared to proceed. So let's get it on. So let's bring up the slide deck so we can go ahead and look at this. And hopefully I can do it this way. Yes. All right, so here we are. So it's titled, the chapter title, as I said, chapter 6. This is the 3rd edition of the Frank Smallinger text entitled Criminology, Pearson, copyright Pearson 2016. So if those of you that are citing the PowerPoint, you should be citing that information that's down below here. The copyright date is 2016. Pearson Education is the publisher. This is the source, the textbook, Criminology 3E. You can't just put PowerPoint in your citations. That's not going to work because the PowerPoint actually was created by Smallinger or somebody on the Pearson team, and they own this particular document. And you have to properly cite it, just as I do in the beginning of the lecture, because I don't own it. I didn't create this. I can make some minor modifications to it, but it's basically there, so it has to be cited properly. So I didn't put that in today. Our chapter objectives today is that we're going to look at the major principles of sociological theories, which, regardless of which book you have, if at the beginning, we're at the beginning of the chapter, and it's going to tell you exactly what these chapter objectives are in the title page for the chapter. And then the following page is going to give you the major principles of sociological theories. So you should definitely read through those if you have not already. Like I said, the best way to do this is to read through the chapter first, highlight what you consider the important points, then attend the lecture, whether it's on campus or here online, and then review it again afterwards to answer any questions. Go through the end of chapter questions that are in the textbook and see if you get it right in your head. The goal is obviously that you want to learn this material, not just be able to answer the questions and get a grade. So that's one of the best ways to do that, is review it first, then do the lecture, review it again. Now, since you've already done a good job of reading and highlighting when you first went through it, and then you have the PowerPoint, the lecture, then the second time you review the chapter, you probably go through a little bit faster because now you can identify the important points and skip through anything that the details that maybe you don't feel you need to know. Although one good way to make sure you do catch what you need to know is also, even before you start, is to review the entire requirements for the week. So look at the discussion questions, look at the chapter, the assignment questions, look at the end of chapter questions, and maybe you take some notes that during the course of the the lecture, during my review of the book, I'm looking for the answers to these questions. So you're not like waiting till the very end and then looking for the questions. Oh, where did I see that? If you look at the questions first, maybe you make some notes, and then as you're going through the chapter, so, oh, wow, there was a question about one of the discussion questions was about what was going on in the Brewery Town section of Philadelphia. And that's one of our discussion questions. I used a recent Philadelphia Inquirer article about a recent City of Philadelphia event that occurred in May. And I want you to try to determine what issue is actually occurring there as far as the social structure issues, or so, what's going on in that community that might have led to this violent activity. And I'm going to be posting another article that was in today's Philadelphia Inquirer, today being the 22nd. Yeah, 22nd of June, second day of summer, if you will. And that article is a follow-up, which is also going to help you. So make sure you read those articles before you try the discussion questions, because if you don't read the articles first, you got no idea what I'm talking about. And you're wasting your time answering the discussion questions if you don't read the article first. So major principles, sociological theories. We're going to look at the conceptual basis for social structure theories. In other words, what are they built upon? Three major types of social structure theories, which I'm going to tell you what they are very shortly. We're going to get again in each of them. Basically, social disorganization, strain, culture, conflict. Although in the lecture, they also refer to social life as being a major type. So we're going to get through that. All right, we're going to look at strain theory, summarize strain theory. We're going to describe culture, conflict, and subcultural theories, including differential opportunity. We're going to summarize the policy implications of various structure theories. One thing in this list of chapter objectives, they don't mention social disorganization at all, which is a big one that we're going to get into. And is a big one in how people perceive causes of crime today. What's going on in the community? How is the community structured? What are the bad things that are going on? And that's what we're talking about, social disorganization. So that's a big one, but they don't mention it in the objectives. But we're going to be talking about that very shortly. So major principles of sociological theories, like I said, they are in the very beginning of the chapter. So, look at this, basically the second page of the chapter on social structure, regardless of what book you're in. The one I'm looking at, it's on page 105. If you're in the second edition, it's probably 90 something or 80 something. I don't have that one in front of me right now. So three major sociological approaches: social structure, in other words, how is the community built? How are things put together? Social process is how do people interact, and social life is how do we go through life and do things. So chapter 7, should say the next chapter. Chapter 7 for those of you in the third edition, 6 for those of you in the second edition, is all about social process, which we're going to do next week. And we're also going to cover the chapter after that, which is about more rebellion and cultural issues as well. And that particular chapter, I went too far, is chapter 8 in the third edition, chapter 7 in the second edition, and it's about social conflict, which is similar to the culture conflict we're going to be talking about today. It's basically how different groups within the culture relate to each other. So it's very similar to what we're going to talk about in the structure areas, culture conflict, but that there's a whole chapter dedicated to culture conflict. All right. So sociological theories are basically a group of perspectives that focus on the nature of what they call power relationships that exist. There's a typo in the slide deck here, between social groups and on the influences that various social phenomena bring to bear on the types of behaviors that tend to categorize groups of people. What does that mean in English? For most of us, you look at this and it's like, okay, what are they talking about? It's like, okay, we know that in society, there's certain groups of people that have power in our society. And there's maybe other people that don't have power in our society. I think maybe you can identify some of that if you look at the article about Brewery Town, which you have to do for the discussion. Is it the people that are running the government? Is it the people who are have more money, more power? Who is making decisions for everybody else? So we're looking at the relationships that exist between the various groups within our society. Sociological theories are doing that. And we're also looking at what happens, what influences behavior in society, what activities occur that have an influence on society. So basically it's all about what's going on outside. In the last two chapters, we talked about biological issues, so what's going on the inside, and psychological and psychiatric issues, again, what's going on the inside. These next three chapters are basically what is the impact of what's going on outside on my behavior. What might I do to make up for the fact that I'm living in poverty? And I see 2 blocks away where they just build a nice brand new condo building, and all the people are driving Mercedes, BMWs, and Lexus, and they got all these nice cars, and I can't afford a slice of bread for my family. I have a problem there. We're going to call that problem relative deprivation. But do I then decide to steal one of those cars so that I have something cool like those people down the street? What does this? So there's this group of sociological theories suggest that does happen. One of many things that happen because of how people respond or react to what's going on in the society around them. Not to be confused with when we're talking about biosocial theories previously. The biosocial theories are talking about how the environment may make changes to the biology or how persons interrelate to that environment. There's a lot of similarities. Don't get me wrong. There are a lot of similarities, but the people that built sociological theories were primarily talking about how people react or behave as a response to either the structure that surrounds them or their interrelation with society or the conflict that's going on within society. And we see all that. And it's all relevant. But people still obviously make decisions. Going back to classical theory, not every person who's in poverty that looks down and sees all the BMWs and Mercedes down the street is going to steal one. So there are other things that impact. So don't get, keep in mind that as criminology developed, you have all these different theorists that had ideas, and some said, "Oh, it's all in the body. It's a genetic thing. It gets passed down. You got bad people." Some would say it's all in the mind. It's the psychological issues or brain dysfunction or whatever that cause people to behave. And others would say it's all about how people react to the environment that they're stuck in. And all of that's true. For some people, it might be a combination of all of that. For others, it might be the fact, like that guy, Michael, that had the tumor in his brain, who had, maybe a little extra sexual desire that most people don't have. And then when he lost his ability to stop himself from doing things, he did bad things. That was a biological or a psychiatric issue that was going on up here. So there are a combination. When you look overall, by the time we're done the course, you should be able to understand what the various theories are, but also understand that really, as we said in the very beginning, that criminology is interdisciplinary, and you have all these different issues coming together in different people in different situations, and what is the issue for me may not be the issue for you, as opposed to someone else down the street. All right, social structure is basically the pattern of our social relationships that exist within society. There's a stable structure. If it's a good structure, stable structure, things are going well, houses are nice, neighborhood's nice, everything's good. That's a good social structure. Social process, we're looking at the interaction between and among the institutions, individuals, and groups. So how do you interact with the government? How do you interact with the nonprofit down the street, or the church, or your neighbors, other groups in society? That's social process, and there's a variety of theories that attend to that, which we'll be looking at next week. Social life is just the ongoing interaction, usually some kind of structure involved, that occurs between persons in a society, including the socialization process and your social behavior in general. How do we learn to behave in our society? Granted, go back when we're talking about psychological theory, there are some similarities here about how people are socialized and how people learn. Here, from a sociological perspective, we're talking about how the whole society interacts and how people learn the appropriate and possibly inappropriate ways to act within a society. All right, 3 key sociological explanations for crime is that crime is the result of an individual's location within the structure of society. So, as an example, a social structure theory of crime would suggest that it's more likely that someone living in a downtrodden area of the city, where there's a lot of poverty, a lot of graffiti, a lot of abandoned homes, a lot of vacant lots, all that stuff going on, they're more likely to be involved in crime than someone who's living in, a nice suburban community with single family houses and well-kept lawns, and, everybody's got cars and all that. That's social structure. So if the social structure theorists would suggest that if you are planted in that so-called bad environment, that you're more likely to become criminal. So how real is that? Obviously, that those of you that live or are familiar with some of those neighborhoods know that there are a lot of good people that live there. How come that social structure didn't cause them to become criminals? So later on, we're going to be talking about, as we do all the time, about some of the critiques, and that's one of them. That it doesn't explain why one person becomes a criminal in that environment and another would not. Another explanation: crime is the end product of the various social processes, and especially inappropriate socialization and social learning. So again, social process theory, your interaction with various people and groups within society and what you learn. So if your social process theory would suggest that if you are exposed, and these are just very, very broad examples or specific examples, which don't happen to everybody, but let's say that you've grown up in a family that your brother was in a gang and you're brought up in a gang life, and that's what you do. Or I went to a lecture last night by a guy named George Anastasia, who used to write for the Philadelphia Inquirer all about the Italian mafia. And you have the same thing there. You have somebody who's brought up in what they call the life, and they're used to, if anybody's ever watched the Sopranos, they're used to that lifestyle, and that's how they're socialized. That's what they interact with other people in a life, whether it be gangs in Baltimore or West Philly or Camden, or the Italian mafia maybe out of South Philly, or wherever else they planted themselves around the region. Whereas, say, a person who grows up in a family that's a church-going family with tremendous values, and you're always going to the church and you're interacting, you're in the choir, you're in the youth group and all those things, you're socialized in that pattern. And that's the social process idea. One of the ideas of social process is your socialization is based upon your interactions, and how often are you exposed to these negative things versus how often you're exposed to the good things. Now, like I said, I gave you 2 very polar opposites: somebody raised in the gang life or the mafia, and somebody basically raised in the church. But we all know that not everybody is totally in both in one camp or the other. You have somebody who grows up in a religious family who hangs out in a street corner with the gang members. Well, where they go, according to social process and another theory called differential association, is how often do they hang out with the gang people? What's the intensity of what they're hanging out with versus how often they go to church and on all that stuff. And that might influence which direction they go. All right, and the last key, and so these 3 are indicative of the 3 chapters that we're going to do over the next 2 weeks. The last one is crime is a product of class struggle. Now, some people think we still have class struggle in our society, others do not. Maybe a good example, if you go back in history to communism and the struggle between the different classes, or if anybody's from India, have different classes or castes, and you have maybe struggles between. Here in the United States, it might be that you have the lower class of folks who are in poverty versus the middle class versus the upper class, each fighting to get what's best for them, and people in power taking for themselves maybe more than some people think that they should, and people on the lower end deciding that they need to take to get what they deserve. That could be a class struggle. And if you look at the Brewery Town article again, maybe there's a class struggle there. You might be able to put that label on it. Getting a little ahead of ourselves, but that article is interesting in that you could draw a lot of inferences based upon some of these theories from what is in that article for that discussion. So make the best of it. All right, what's the conceptual basis for social structure theories? So this is like a little bit of introduction to social structure. We're going to break off this particular lecture and take up actual description of the first of the social structure theories we're going to cover in the next video, because there's a lot to the next one I want to cover. So social structure theories explain crime by reference to some aspect of the social fabric. And I gave you examples already. It's like, what's the neighborhood like? Are the houses run down? How well are the properties kept? Are there vacant lots down the street? And we're going to see later on this kind of idea of social structure led to the broken windows theory of crime, which some people think is wonderful, and then there's other people. Actually, there was a not an article, but more or less an article, but a thing written by 3 pastors here in the city of Philadelphia that said that broken windows policing is one of the bad things that's repressing certain people in our community. So social structure theories explain crime by, what's the society made up of? They emphasize relationships among the institutions, describe the types of behavior that tend to characterize groups of people rather than individuals. So in all sociological theories, we're more attentive to groups rather than individual people. All right, what are the 3 major types of social structure theories? And we're going to describe them separately in separate videos because there's a lot to cover in each of them. First is social disorganization theory. And it's basically social disorganization theory suggests that people get involved in negative behaviors because the structure of your society is messed up. It's really bad, it's disorganized. Strain theory is suggesting that people respond in different ways because they're strained or stressed, and they respond in different ways to what's around them. And we'll get into what those ways are. And culture conflict theory is basically, again, there's some kind of conflict between various cultures, whether it's a primary culture, say somebody moves in here from another country, and they have certain cultural things, cultural norms that are okay in their society, and they do something that is totally in conflict with what's okay in our society. And and again, the Brewery Town article again is a good example of some type of conflict. And of course, there's subcultures within the larger culture. So we're going to get into all that. In our next video, we're going to follow up with social structure specifically, including Emil Durkheim and others. So stay tuned. This is the end of video 1, Criminology Week 6 lecture. Okay, we're going to stop the share. We're going to stop recording me. Bye.